National Assembly discuss economic issues. And later on, aging population in Vietnam's economic development. Hello there, you're tuning into another edition of BizLine here on VTV International. I'm your host Hoàng Hằng, and as usual, we'll begin with some economic highlights over the past week. Last week, the 14th National Assembly convened its fifth plenary session. During the first days of the working session, National Assembly deputies discussed several economic issues. According to the report at the session, 7 out of 13 economic indicators have been achieved, while economic growth has been maintained at 6.81%. A facilitating government has been built over the years, creating momentum for economic sectors. Notably, economic growth in the first quarter of this year reached 7.38%, the highest it's reached in 10 years, while the state budget revenue in the first 4 months increased by 12.1% over the same period. Deputies urged the government ministries, sectors and businesses to grasp opportunities created by the Fourth Industrial Revolution while restructuring the economy and reviewing Vietnam's growth model to achieve the set target growth of 6.7% this year. Deputies also discussed related laws which affects the country's economy, including law on special administrative economic zones, law on planning, law on cultivation, and law on competition. The United States has raised tariffs on steel from Vietnam that Washington says originated in China and evaded anti-dumping duties on Chinese steels. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, importers of corrosion-resistant and cold-rolled flat steel from Vietnam will be required to post deposits to pay possible duties of 39 to 256%. The U.S. Department of Commerce said that products made in Vietnam that use Chinese steels would trigger the same anti-dumping penalties as steel imported directly from China. In response to this, the Trade Remedies Authorities of Vietnam has affirmed that Vietnam's exported steel products do not use raw materials that come from China. Last year, Vietnam imported nearly 5 million tons of steel, among which included 100,000 tons of steel made from China. However, steel made from China is used only for domestic production. In order to be exempted from U.S. tariffs, steel export companies in Vietnam have to provide documentation and licenses which prove their steel products do not come from China. A provision in Decree 69, which was recently issued by the government, states that goods that are temporarily imported for re-export are subject to supervision until they are re-exported from Vietnam. According to this decree, no cargo transported by containers can be divided during the carriage of goods from the temporary import port to the place of re-export. Goods that are temporarily imported for re-export can stay in Vietnam no more than 60 days after the completion of custom procedures. The retention period of goods can be extended twice with less than 30 days each time. When the deadline is over, the goods must be re-exported from Vietnam or be destroyed. Consumer loans account for about 18% of total outstanding loans in Vietnam. This data was released by the State Bank of Vietnam at a seminar on consumer finance security held on Monday morning. More than 90% of consumer loans still come from commercial banks, while ones from financial companies account for only 8.2%. Experts have said that consumer lending in financial companies has the potential to grow further because of the simplicity of procedures compared to banks. Consumer lending rates in financial companies are about twice as high as ones from commercial banks, which go up to 20% to 30%. Most ATM domestic card holders still have to wait until 2020 to be able to use chip cards instead of magnetic stripe cards, despite growing card information theft. According to the State Bank of Vietnam, or SBV's payment department, some 90% of Vietnam's 77 million bank cards currently use magnetic stripe technology, which is easy to forge and lags behind the global trends. Security experts have also warned that Vietnam's delayed transition to chip technology can put the country at risk of becoming a haven for card criminals from all over the world, as it is one of the few countries where the use of magnetic swipe card is still dominant. Solidens, an Asia-focused corporate strategy consulting firm, recently released a report entitled Unlocking Vietnam's Fintech Growth Potential. In the report, Vietnam's fintech market was announced to have reached $4.4 billion last year and is estimated to grow to $7.8 billion in 2020. The main factors driving fintech development in Vietnam includes the increase of internet and smartphone users, the robust development of e-commerce, and the improvement of the country's regulatory framework. If 70% of Vietnamese citizens over the age of 15 have bank accounts by the end of 2020, Vietnam's fintech will be boosted. Those are some economic highlights over the past week. Up next in our crosstalk, we will see how Vietnam is preparing for its aging population and incorporating that demographic transition into its socio-economic development plans. According to the World Health Organization, or WHO, Vietnam is among the countries with the fastest aging rate in the world. The number of people aged 60 or above now accounts for some 10% of the total population. This phenomenon has widespread and long-term impacts on the country, both in positive and negative terms, requiring comprehensive and proactive policies for the elderly. How has Vietnam attached that demographic transitions into its socio-economic development plans? We first look into the situation in the following report.
Vietnam is highly regarded for its recent economic growth as well as the attractiveness of the labor market because of the golden population structure, with over 60% of the labor force being young workers. However, Vietnam's population is aging quickly. The country has an estimated 10 million older adults. This number is expected to rise to 19 million by 2030 and 28 million by 2050. This raises concerns about welfare and pensions for the elderly at a time when Vietnam is focusing on economic integration and requires a large labor force.
Hiện nay là Việt Nam mình đang có tốc độ già hóa có thể nói là gần như nhanh nhất thế giới. Và đặc biệt là khi so sánh với cả cái mức thu nhập hiện nay của chúng ta theo đánh giá ngân hàng thế giới thì mới đạt ở mức là thu nhập trung bình thấp. Và vì lý do đó thì tốc độ già hóa nhanh gắn liền với thu nhập trung bình thấp thì đương nhiên nó là tạo ra những cái thách thức rất lớn cho các chính sách an sinh xã hội.
Over the past 2 decades, Vietnam has enjoyed population gains, the impetus of economic growth created by the advantage of the population in working age. That impetus has been mostly fully exploited, with the working age population having peaked in 2013 and now declining.
We have invited to our studio today Mr. Kengi Sihan, senior economist from UNDP Vietnam, for a more in-depth analysis on the issue. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ms. Sang.
Now, considered inevitable for the nation's development path, how does an aging population affect the whole economy?
I think aging population is a very important issue and a structural problem for all nations in the world. First of all, when the aging increases in the society, for the economy, I think dependency ratio will automatically increase, which means labor force will be reduced as well. In other words, the government's expenditures on health and social security will also significantly increase. This may also affect the long-term economic growth rate in terms of reducing public investments and increasing these sorts of current transfers. Another point is, as the working age population increases, it may restrict the productivity of the economy. That may also deteriorate the long-term economic growth rate of the country. And one another point I can highlight is there may have significant changes in the consumption patterns of the society. from much more, health-based issues. There will be much more consumption, and these consumptions need to be financed with a strong budget.
It is said that the population getting older, the social welfare and medical system will burden economic growth and the state budget as well. So could you elaborate more on this?
The burden on public finances, first of all, when the aging increases in any country, and if the social security system is not well designed and well financed, in other words, the expenditures of these people will increase. And these increases will be paid by the government budgets. So what it means, the deficits of budgets will significantly rise. And in other words, public sector borrowing rates will increase. This will affect all lending of government bonds, and automatically financial system will deteriorate from all that processes. Not only public investments, but also private investments will be deteriorated from all these processes. Means, all economies, especially developing countries, need physical investments and human capital investments. But if you don't have such an amount of money to finance it, and just paying for social security system for that money, then it will be a problem in the long term.
So there is a concern that when aging population group expands, the economy will fall into a deficit term. That means when people's total expenditure will exceed total incomes. So what are the solutions to solve the deficit?
There needs some structural policies, and these policies need to be carefully and persistently, consistently implemented by the governments. And the problem here is you need to increase the income of people. So how you can do that? There are some modules for that. For instance, technology is one of the things. So you can increase the quality of labor in the labor market or human capital through formal or informal educations, on the job trainings, etc., and other things as well. So one of the things is you need to improve or increase the income capacity of people. And then the saving capacity will automatically rise up. And you need to preserve these savings by supporting financial markets and labor markets, so you can improve your saving capacity and strengthen them. And then for future, these social security funds will be improved and will be helpful for future. State sides, I think the financial markets can also be helpful for this purpose. For instance, savings, how you will use these savings. And the money needs to be linked to financial markets. And for derivative markets, for instance, can be developed for that. But of course, for this situation, regulations are highly critical, and security markets needs to be regulated in line with this. And in the global market, pension, there are huge pension funds, and all funds are regulated in this perspective. And this can be also implemented in case of Vietnam in future.
Raising the retirement age has been proposed by the Ministry of Labor, Invalids and Social Affairs in May 2017. Although the policy is beneficial in utilizing the work experience of the elderly while creating savings in the pension budget, it also means fewer job prospects for younger generations.
Có một bộ phận rất lớn các em của chúng ta bước chân vào nguồn nhân lực đang chờ công ăn việc làm, mà chúng ta lại không sử dụng cái chỗ đấy, thì chúng ta bỏ lỡ đi về cái sức khỏe của con người. Còn khoảng gần 200-300 ngàn các em cử nhân, kỹ sư đã tốt nghiệp đại học rồi, đào tạo cơ bản rồi. Thậm chí có những em đã học xong đại học, học trên đại học rồi, học thạc sĩ rồi, không có công ăn việc làm.
While many people advocate for the policies to raise retirement age, other people do not. According to a recent research by the Vietnam General Confederation of Labor, some 90% of the people, or the respondents when asked, all said that they do not want their retirement age to be extended, especially those working in harmful environments. For example, the seafood processing industry, the textile industry, and construction industry.
Despite these drawbacks, raising the retirement age is still considered by policymakers as one of the key solutions to the aging population problem. The Ministry of Labor, Invalids and Social Affairs proposed two scenarios on raising retirement ages starting from January the 1st, 2021. The first is to increase the retirement age to 60 for women and 62 for men. The second scenario is to lift the retirement age to 60 for women and 65 for men.
Đến năm 2026 thì Việt Nam bắt đầu vào cái giai đoạn già hóa dân số, và các chuyên gia quốc tế đánh giá Việt Nam sẽ là một trong những quốc gia mà có tốc độ già hóa dân số nhanh nhất thế giới trong thời gian tới. Chúng tôi có nêu với hai phương án, tuy nhiên thì chúng tôi thấy rằng kinh nghiệm quốc tế họ nói là tốt nhất là chọn phương án 3 tháng 1. Và như vậy thì sau 20 năm nữa chúng ta mới hoàn thiện được cái tuổi nghỉ hưu của phụ nữ là 60 tuổi. Và 8 năm sau nữa, kể từ năm 2021 thì đàn ông mới là 62 tuổi. Như thế có thể là, chứ không phải như dư luận hiện nay hiểu rằng chúng ta quyết một cái là thành 60 tuổi ngay và nam là 62 tuổi ngay.
Experts also propose that a rise in the working time should be prescribed by sub-law documents like a decree or a circular, which is more easily amended than a law.
Among the solutions, extending working age for workers is one of the most feasible. So what are the pros and cons for this solution?
I think, first of all, one of the advantages can be actuarial situation can be improved. Because if you extended the retirement age, it means the payments of the system will be extended. The distribution of burden, of financial burden, the distribution of financial burden for these future payments also will be better distributed. It is also another important point. In case of disadvantages, I can say that if you extend the working age, in other words, it may also rise the unemployment rate. And another point is in the labor market, if you have much more older people, it means there may have some limitations on productivity side. The higher the ratio of older people, the less dynamic of the economy. So it may not easily can be transformed again for high productivity rates.
Now, raising retirement age also means that we may have to face lower productivity, as you've mentioned earlier. So what are the policies for us to really improve productivity and also labor quality in order to overcome such traps?
Yes, I think productivity is the key policy issue for the long-term economic growth and sustainability of economic growth for any country. And Vietnam is in a transformation process and needs to strengthen all the micro-linkages that will help to the productivity. And from that way, if we look, labor market is highly critical. And quality of labor needs to be improved. As I mentioned, in terms of educational quality, in terms of access to labor market, in terms of moving from informal to formal economy. If this can be achieved by implementing structural reforms by the government in a long-term perspective, then definitely productivity will significantly increase in the country, which will help for the long-term economic growth. And I can also mention about the UNDP is also working on all these projects, all these activities, especially related to productivity. What are the thresholds or problems in the micro sectors?
Now, it is said that solutions to an aging economy do not restrict to only the elderly, but also the younger people as well, through encouraging saving for retirement at a younger age and social policies for them as well. So is it necessary to restructure some economic models in Vietnam in order to do so?
Yes, of course. I think young people are the most important for any country, for future of the country, So these people needs to be well equipped and well trained people, first of all, because the main important point here is to have higher income. So if you want to have higher income in your society, you need to have well educated and high value added in these sectors. Much more engaged people needs to be there. So the higher the quality of education, the higher the quality of labor, means the higher the wages and salaries for young people. So these needs to be also worked in case of Vietnam, and young people's incomes needs to be strengthened, and by doing that, saving capacity of the people will be automatically enlarged. So first of all, you need to have the baseline for what are the current situations in the country in terms of income capability and ability. And then for future, there may have some scenario analysis by using these inputs, and also by using this scenario analysis, actuarial structure can be established and necessary policies can be implemented in that way.
Though an aging population is burdening economic growth and financial budgets, it also opens up new opportunities for economic development. For example, over the years, Vietnam has sent hundreds of geriatric nurses to markets with aged populations such as Germany or Japan. Besides, new services related to the elderly have emerged.
Tôi lấy ví dụ như ở Thái Lan chẳng hạn thì người ta lại có những dịch vụ là người già khỏe chăm sóc cho người già yếu hơn. Thì trên thực tế người ta cảm thấy rất là nhân văn, và cái thứ hai là họ vẫn có thu nhập. Thế thì cái người mà già ấy lại chăm sóc cho chính người già thì đương nhiên là họ cảm thấy rằng là họ vẫn là những người mà có đủ sức lực để chăm sóc những người khác. Và vì thế nó tạo ra một xã hội rất là nhân văn, nhưng đồng thời là cũng là một xã hội mà tạo ra được việc làm cũng như là thu nhập cho người cao tuổi.
Nếu như trong các ngành, chẳng hạn ngành nghiên cứu khoa học, ngành giáo dục đào tạo, ngành y tế mà sử dụng được những cái thạc sĩ, những tiến sĩ, những phó giáo sư, những giáo sư thuộc những cái lĩnh vực đấy thì ta sẽ tận dụng được một cái nguồn nhân lực có chất lượng rất cao, có thể coi là đầu ngành đấy, vẫn còn khả năng làm việc được và vẫn còn năng lực cống hiến rất tốt nếu chúng ta có chính sách. Nhưng tôi nghĩ rằng không nhất thiết phải cứng nhắc để đưa vào luật. Những ngành nào có những loại lao động như thế cần phải kéo dài tuổi làm việc cho họ thì anh cho họ cái cơ chế để họ ký hợp đồng.
An aging population also provides a chance for the nation to review and complete its economic development plans with long-term solutions. Those include increasing labor productivity, improving education, and having productivity-based rather than seniority-based salaries.
Khi mình nói đến người cao tuổi thì mình đừng nghĩ rằng chỉ là người cao tuổi bây giờ, mà phải nghĩ đến cả người cao tuổi trong tương lai. Và các chính sách thích ứng với dân số già đấy thì hàm ý rằng là chúng ta phải chuẩn bị từ bây giờ. Cho nên như tôi vừa nói ở ban đầu ấy, thì là chúng ta đang có một cái cơ hội vàng, là có một cái cơ cấu dân số rất là đẹp, tức là có số người trong độ tuổi lao động đang tăng lên và tăng lên rất nhanh. Và chính vì lý do đó thì làm sao tạo được việc làm sao thu hút họ vào hệ thống an sinh xã hội.
By improving elderly healthcare and encouraging saving for retirement from a young age, the future elderly will be able to live more independent.
We have talked a lot about the negative impacts of aging population. Is there any positive impacts at all, in your opinion?
I think if the age population is, as I mentioned, it's a long-term process, and if the countries consider and plans for future in a long-term period, so if the necessary structural reforms is implemented truly, then of course aging population will not be so serious problem for the country. I mean, structurally there are some difficulties, of course, but as I mentioned here, if the quality of labor for these people are higher than on average of the people of other countries, then automatically I think this is not going to be so difficult. And another point is, as I mentioned, social security system. If the country established a well-designed and well-pictured way in the past, so all the long-term benefits will come after. But again, aging population is a fact, and every country needs to consider these things before coming as a real problem. I mean, for instance, in case of Vietnam, I think in the next 15 to 20 years, the necessary policies has to be implemented. Otherwise, all these things will be a serious problem for future of the government and economy, I mean.
Now, what opportunities can be seen from an aging economy?
Private sector needs to also support financially this pension system. I mean, the workers, employees in the private sector also needs to be linked to this social security system. It has to be, I think, a little bit compulsory maybe, but this has to be done. Financially, interlinkage needs to be strengthened. This is one issue. Another point is, for private sector, especially as I mentioned, when the consumption patterns in the society changes, then services became much more popular, like health tourism, like age people care sector. All these sectors, I mean, these sorts of services sectors became much more important for many countries. So this can be also used as a potential opportunity. Another point is for private sector investments, because when age population increases in the society, and in any case, private sector needs to make investments. But these investments, if these investments come with technology, so the ongoing and the existing labor market will utilize this technology much more. So for the future of the country, I think by using technology, productivity will significantly rise, and which may also help, I mean, for this situation for future.
Could you share with us some lessons from aging economies in the world, such as Japan or Germany, and how they have resolved the existing issues?
Mm-hmm. I can say that in case of Japan, for instance, they introduced new medical technologies for medical services. They also strengthened their national pension system, quality of national pension system, by introducing new packages, new programs. So this is also another point that I can highlight. And another issue is women, because in case of Japan, as far as I remember from the reports, they are trying to bring women back to the labor market, which is also highly critical for that country. I mean, aging is every time a universal problem, but solutions may differ from one country to another. For instance, in case of Germany introduced new immigration policy, which is also very relevant with, again, technology-based issues and sectors. They introduced new program for immigration. Another point is they increased the retirement age from 65 to 67, which is also, as we discussed, I think, another option for that. And another important issue is, in the labor market, they provided some flexibilities in terms of part-time or supporting aged people who works in the labor market. So this is another option. So they are not easily get rid of these people, but trying to increase these people in the labor market, but by making some check and balances in the markets in terms of productivity developments.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sam.
It will take some time for the government to implement long-term and bottom-up solutions to improve later birth productivity and services for the elderly. In the meantime, raising the retirement age and increasing the birth rate are considered more viable solutions by Vietnamese policymakers. Most importantly, for younger generations, by reshaping their education plans, they could see their participation in the workforce last longer, which would increase their lifetime earnings and standard of living. And that wraps up this edition of BizLine. In the meantime, you can log on to vtv4.vn or our YouTube channel at vtv4go for more of our programs and updates. From our team here in Hanoi, until next time. Okay, thank you so much for joining us.